Good.
Should we get into some movie news?
Yeah, there's a couple of new things that have happened this weekend that you need to break down to me, including this new one dealing with not our academy, but that other academy.
Yeah, the Academy Awards run the Oscars. The Academy has decided to include new restrictions on what films will be eligible for its top prize of Best Picture. In the past, all the movie needed to do in order to qualify for Best Picture was have a 7-day theatrical run in either New York or LA. So that's why we got to see a lot of these movies that didn't have like a full theatrical release already get nominated for Oscars before most people had a chance to see them. The Academy's decided to expand those requirements, so now those films will have to have a 7-day theatrical run in 10 of the top 50 U.S. markets no later than 45 days after the initial release. So that means these movies are going to have to expand more quickly and more widely than I think we've seen in the past if they plan on competing for Oscars. A lot of people think this specifically is going to have an impact on Netflix's ability to compete certain films. For example, something like Knives Out, which only had a 1-week window in a couple cities, would not have been eligible for Best Picture under these guidelines that are starting next year. So Art, yay or nay, you think this is a good move on the Academy's part to require an expanded theatrical release for Best Picture contenders? Keep in mind, just Best Picture, not the other categories.
So you could still be up for acting and scripts and everything, but you won't be.
Foreign language film would be one of the ones that probably is most affected for a rule like this, but it should not be subject to the rule.
It's mixed because I understand the difference between what it takes for an independent movie to be able to get this. That's probably who it affects the most.
Mm-hmm.
The streamers, no offense, right? Because I was like, oh, no, put the money on Netflix. That's not Netflix. That's on them not creating a good relationship with the theaters. So I don't really care about how it affects streamers. I care more about how it affects independent films who may not be able to have a proper rollout, because it's not just a matter of money. It's also the matter of, is there room? You know, like how many theaters can actually play you when there's a bunch of blockbusters in the way, when there's a bunch of other bigger movies that are now blockbusters and contenders, you know, like Dune, Barbie, like all of these are now Oppenheimer are now considered big movies that are in contention for Best Picture as well. It's not just the English Patience anymore. All of the tinier independent movies are coming up against $100 million budgets now for Best Picture, which, you know, that's how it was in the 50s and the 60s before it went to a lot of more smaller dramas. So I think it will affect how people distribute and eventually ripple down to what they're putting out, you know? If they're looking to get these awards... at the end of it all, doesn't the Academy just stream them all in the Academy library? So does it really matter?
Exactly.
I don't know. If it helps theaters, I guess that's a positive for it. But for the Academy, I don't really see it.
Yeah, I mean, I like that it's going to force particularly streamers to maybe take theatrical a little more seriously. You know, Netflix, places
As
like
they
that.
should.
They have the means to get their films in theaters. It's just a matter of actually negotiating with an AMC or a Regal or what have you. And when it comes to those indies, like, there will be some films that maybe don't have the financial backing to, you know, get in as many theaters as is needed for the requirement. But I feel like a lot of those films aren't really films that get nominated for Best Picture anyway. Best Picture tends to be these films from bigger studios and even like the A24s and Neons of the world. It's not so much the oscilloscopes or even like the IFC films.
But it's not helping.
It certainly won't help, but
A24 got in there because those people were bank people. As much as everybody loves A24, they were bank people who worked for other studios, and now they're here.
Right. And I just think, like, I think if we want to expand the field to include more independent films, there's other moves that are going to have to be made that are not about the theatrical requirement. It's going to be maybe like forcing some kind of viewing requirement on Academy voters or things like that. So I don't really mind this deal so much. I think ultimately it is, like you said, something that's going to help theater owners actually get their movies into get more movies in theaters for a longer time. And, have that commitment. And it's going to help people like us who want to see these movies on a big screen and, often find that they get yanked before we have a really good chance to. So I like the move. I think maybe we'll find some negative consequences in the future, but I think for the most part, it's a good idea.
We both agree, though. stunts category. It's
Yeah.
overdue.
Well, did you
Speaking-
see the Chad Stahelski thing?
I did. Yeah, he said
Yeah.
they're in talks. He says it's close.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'll believe it when I see it. This HBO thing, Zach. If you've been an inner cutie, you have heard us say that it's was only going to be a matter of time. Break down how Warner Brothers has embarrassed themselves this weekend.
Yeah, so let's like rewind maybe 10-ish years to when Netflix was still the young upstart and all these big networks didn't know any better but to license their hit shows to Netflix. Netflix grows into the biggest of all the studios, and the other streamers realize, hey, maybe we should keep these shows for ourselves and launch our own streaming networks. And we're now in the situation where we're at, where there's a million streamers and they're all fighting over their content, and none of them seems to be being that profitable. So Warner Bros. Is deciding to swerve back in the opposite direction. They are now in talks to license at least Insecure, if not more HBO content, back to Netflix in a move that will hopefully, I guess, make them some money.
Yes, it will.
But it's also going to give Netflix access to content that they didn't have for a little while.
I hope that stock's good for you, bro.
Yeah. I mean, look, I got Netflix holdings. I don't mind that. But yay or nay, do you think this is a David Zaslav blunder?
Oh, blunder. This is actually the smartest thing that he's possibly done, but it's only a blunder because it's egg on his face because he claimed to want to be taking it the other way. This is a double freaking yay for me. Netflix continues to thrive the way that they did. We don't need to see all the reality content.
Yeah.
Focus on just the best movies. I don't need to see so many terrible movie originals. I like you hosting things. There is an aspect of Netflix every time that I look at what's coming out where I go, finally, Puss in Boots will be on streaming this week. Missing will be on streaming. And everybody, when a movie comes out, doesn't ask, is it in theaters? Is it on VOD? They don't even ask for a specific streaming service. They say, when is it on Netflix?
Yeah.
And that is how the world works. And I think that being able to have something like Insecure on there will get more eyes on Insecure. I think it is a fantastic thing for a lot of these shows, especially with the way we're going to wrap up our last story of the week. It's funny how they all come together. The first one was about box office, right? And getting more movies in theaters to help people go back to cinemas, and also realizing, I heard some people pitch, I think we should have movies playing in cinemas for like 3 to 6 months, and they're just pitching the model that we've had for so long. And now you're talking about this, which is just a model that began with streaming. Yes, it is the smartest thing to have. It's goofy, but it's honestly the way that it always should have been. But people got greedy, and now they got spanked. So yes, it is embarrassing for Zaslav, but it's not the most embarrassing thing he's done, because this one will actually see results.
Yeah.
And it's much better than cutting a movie for tax purposes, which seems like what Paramount is now doing. I thought Star Trek was one of their biggest shows. Rise of the Pink Ladies, I've heard some goofy things happen with the production of that one. But to, excuse me, it's making me choked up.
Yeah.
To cancel them and completely remove them, it creates this new debacle with streaming services because there is no VOD, there is no discs of these things. So they are essentially, unless you're a pirate, getting these completely out of circulation. And I think that is horrendous. I think that is the most embarrassing thing to do. And it continues the cycle of when a service is so stingy that instead of marketing it out to somebody else, they'd rather just get rid of it completely. Again, I'm assuming for what David over on HBO, Warner, started. Cut it so that you can save some money in some, I don't know, financial way in the background. I think this is goofy. I don't know if you have any pitch. The yay or nay for you is if you see this as an effective way for shows like this that you may or may not watch to keep these streaming services afloat.
Well, I mean, like they've obviously figured out that this is somehow financially beneficial to them, but like it I think ultimately is going to be this thing that causes a divide between the executives who make these decisions and the creatives who feel burned by them. You know, we see all the guilds right now are in the middle of these intense negotiations, and part of the reason the reason why a lot of these negotiations feel so dire is because people see things like this happening around the industry and don't feel any sense of security that they'll get fair jobs, or security that the jobs that they actually work will amount to anything that lasts on any of these services when so many of them disappear and, like you said, don't have a physical release to back them up. So look, if it was like a financially terrible decision for them, all the streamers wouldn't be doing it, but they are all doing it. It's
Right.
just something that I think is ultimately going to not only hurt their relationship with the creatives, but hurt their relationship with regular people too. Because, you know, I saw some people who said, I signed up for Paramount because I'm a Star Trek fan. My money went specifically to try and watch this show, and now this show is
Yeah.
not happening. So
That's
like
false
what
marketing
happened,
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, circling back to the HBO licensing Insecure story, you know, for me, one of the reasons why I think it's not necessarily the best idea is because Netflix, I think, feels kind of in a more tenuous position than they've been in the past. Like, they don't feel like quite the dominant force as they were maybe 3 years ago. And a lot of that feels like because of the content that they're producing is not as compelling, not as interesting. And to give them, you know, I think we're going to find that if we keep eliminating the content that people find interesting, their relationship to these different streamers is not going to be as strong. They're not going to be able to take the audiences for granted.
Agreed. You can have a financial benefit, but yeah, you're losing your audience and what they care about for you. So,
Yeah.
hey, it's some terrible stuff that's happening out there, and it's just shifting. It's a shifting environment that we're always covering, but we will see how it moves forward. Get Movie Pass, and I think everything will be solved for the
Right.
most part.